Hey everyone, thanks for staying with us. As you all know, I have the distinct privilege of being here with Filip right now. As a quick introduction, Filip is the co-founder and CEO of Verkada. Verkada is a Sequoia-backed unicorn that is disrupting the $100 billion enterprise security industry. Filip began his startup journey while he was an undergraduate student at Stanford, where he co-founded an edtech company called CourseRank that he would go on to sell to Chegg. In 2016, Filip founded Verkada alongside Hans Robertson, a famed founder and angel investor, and 3 other Stanford alum. Ever since then, he's been continuing to grow Verkada impressively. Today, they have a valuation over $1 billion and almost 1,000 employees. So with that, let's get started. Thank you so much, Filip, for taking the time to speak with us today here at TreeHacks 2022.
Thanks, Rid. I'm very excited to be here, and welcome everyone. And I'm very excited to talk to this audience.
Awesome. So just wanted to kick things off by zooming back a little and diving into your time at Stanford. You studied computer science with the focus on systems for your bachelor's and computer science with the focus on human-computer interaction for your master's. What parts of your education do you think were particularly formative in your development as a technologist?
Yeah, so look, I mean, I came into Stanford and I wasn't, like many students, sure what I was going to do. I had some ideas about wanting to do things in business. A lot of my family were engineers who ended up doing business. Actually by complete coincidence, one of my friends from my freshman dorm was very into computer science. So I owe him, that he dragged me into computer science. I've always liked computers. I've always liked, technology and gadgets, but I did not know that I was going to do computer science as a major. So Benjamin, who's actually one of my co-founders today at, Verkada, he was a freshman dorm hallmate, and he dragged me into computer science. I remember taking one of the first, CS classes. I think it was like 106A, 106B, and then 107. I think those are still courses. Hopefully there's still courses that you guys have. And I liked them for an odd reason. They were hard. And my thought process was like, well, if I'm going to Stanford and paying all this money, it's good to take things that are hard because I'm learning something new. And so that was the beginning of my journey in computer science. I think what I quickly learned and what made me fall in love with the domain was that it allowed me to build things seemingly out of nothing. After taking a couple of classes, and it was just literally, I think, 106A, B, 7, 108, I got this feeling of like, wow, I can take these skills and I can like now build things that my friends can use. And that actually is, what led to the beginning of CourseRank. So a couple of my, my friends that I met through the computer science program and I were excited about, kind of taking our new skills and building products. And so we, in our sophomore year, actually took the senior or the software project class. And we took that class because we're like, we really want to build something real. And that's what gave, kind of the birth to CourseRank and kind of everything on my journey followed from that. And then I think you also touched on, kind of another aspect, which is, yes, my undergrad was in systems and then my master's was in human-computer interaction. So it's interesting, when I was doing my undergrad, initially there were no tracks. And so by the time I was a senior, I've taken all the hard systems classes. So I was like, I better get the, systems track. That's how I ended up deciding that. And then through the work I was doing with CourseRank, I realized that, in addition to, sort of the passion for computer science, I was really intrigued by design. And so I started taking all these, all these classes, some of them in the D school, some of them in the CS department. And that's what prompted me to do my master's in human-computer interaction, all of which became very, very useful down the line in building different products and ultimately, Verkada.
Awesome. Yeah, going off of that, you mentioned that you spent time in college building CourseRank, which is inherently kind of hackathon-y since you were bootstrapping this idea from a dorm room.
Yeah.
At what point did you start thinking of CourseRank as something more than a side project? And how should students decide when they've hit that threshold?
Yeah, I think that's actually a very, very hard, probably the hardest question to answer when you do a startup is how to decide, do you take it and make it into something real, or was it just a weekend project? Or, to make it even harder, if you do commit to starting a startup, you're working on it, you're spending hours and hours and putting maximum effort, at what point do you know that it's working or that you should give up and do something else? That is an insanely difficult question, I think, in general, to answer for anyone starting a company. And obviously, I would say, you're looking for those early signs of success, right? So with Verkada as an example, we started the company in 2016. We built a plan. We had some idea about building, security cameras for the enterprise world. We had no idea how the journey would go, right? So we, sort of gave ourselves, some milestones. One of the first milestones was to launch a product within a year. So we gave ourselves 12 months from zero to, shipping a real camera in a real box. And we did that, and that was, kind of exciting. And then, after that, we had some milestones around like how much volume and like how many cameras we would be able to sell. And I remember to this moment, we built our first camera and we ordered 500 units. That was the initial order. I think that cost us like $200,000. Mind you, we were like kind of self-founded, bootstrapped at the time. My garage, it was a 2-car garage in my home, got filled with cameras. And I looked at it and I was like, holy crap, I will never park a car. I'm out 200 grand. And how the hell are we going to sell these cameras? So that was that moment of like, it really needs to come together. It really needs to happen. And honestly, the first few months of sales were like very tricky, very challenging. Like, who is Verkada? Why should I buy your product? That's what we kept getting. But, fortunately, the sort of MVP first product we've built resonated really well with that market. And that gave us that signal to keep going. So, it's kind of a long-winded answer, but I think with any startup and any project, frankly, that, that folks are doing, I would also always look for those key milestones and reinforcement that the thing that you're working on is making sense, that it's resonating. Like, talk to the users, talk to the customers, make milestones around deliverables, an MVP, something like that, and use those to then fuel the energy that you and your team need to kind of keep going, right? Because ultimately, again, it takes a ton of effort and it's tremendously hard to, build something from nothing. I mean, that's, I think, ultimately the key advantage of any startup team is the effort they put in behind it.
Yeah, that's really amazing advice, and especially instructive for this crowd. Moving to the more recent past, I think you touched on this a little bit, but of course, in 2016, you co-founded Verkada, and I read your Medium article where you discussed the inception of Verkada and how you realized that AI could transform the enterprise video security industry. Could you talk a little bit more about how you came across this industry in the first place, and more generally, how you approach need finding?
Yeah, I mean, I think the way I would describe it is, particularly in Verkada's case, one thing that we, did right, I think, or at least it seems like we did right, is my co-founders and I took a meaningful amount of time to explore the concrete idea that we wanted to work on. So I always describe CourseRank, my first project, as a incidental startup, right? We were students at school. We were using a book to select courses, like literally a printed book. And that was awful. And so we're like, hey, we're going to make it better. But we never really thought about it as, a business, or how does it make sense? How will it scale? And so on and so forth. With Verkada, we were much more deliberate and thoughtful about that approach. So, kind of for a year predating the founding of Verkada, some of my co-founders and I started exploring different ideas and talking to customers, talking to investors, seeing reactions, studying the different markets. And ultimately, I think you have to find something that's a mix of a product category that you're naturally passionate about, that makes sense and resonates to you, and something that has a big meaningful need in the world, right? And that's what's going to allow the business to grow and expand. And for me with Verkada, I've had some prior exposure to video security, just kind of completely coincidentally. So I'm definitely a nerd. I definitely like technology. I definitely buy all the gadgets that someone can buy for their house. And so back in 2012, many years predating Verkada, I was remodeling my home. I put video security cameras. This was, mind you, before like Nest and Arlo and all the cool consumer companies. So I put enterprise cameras. I was like, oh, well, those will be the best. Turned out they were not the best. And so that was my first experience into just seeing that enterprise video security is not quite at the level that, I think a modern, kind of computer science person would have perspective on, right? So that was that one inkling. And then the other, which is, kind of random, but I bring it up because it kind of links it back to the piece about passion and being excited about what you're building. I've done photography for years and years, and I love photography. And through that, I learned a lot about cameras and lenses and how sensors work. And that really tied it together. I was like, wow, I can now take that knowledge from photography, kind of apply and solve interesting computer science problems, and solve this big issue, which is kind of delivering security at scale to businesses. That combination was really exciting to me and my co-founders, and that's really what got us going.
Awesome. I'm sure this will be really useful for folks as they decide what to work on this weekend in TreeHacks as well as beyond. I just wanted to end off by asking you about the challenges you've faced and the lessons you've learned while running Verkada, and also a couple of parting words of advice for the participants, if you could.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think the key lesson I've learned, with Verkada's journey is that the only constant is change. Like literally everything changes every day, and in my job at the company and the way you approach, solving the problems. So I think going into a startup, you sort of have to expect that things won't go your way, that everything will change. And if you're okay with that, it's very exciting. I think it's one of the best learning opportunities in the world. I think, one of the best aspects of my job is I do something different every day, and I feel like I'm learning. So that gives me that energy that's required, to kind of keep the business going. So that's, I think a little bit about, how I think about, the journey. I think to give you like an example of a concrete challenge, and this relates both to like a 2-person team, and now, we have about 1,000-person team. Getting to know your team, communicating effectively with your team, that's something that, every person doing one of these projects is going to have to do. And then you're going to have to reinvent that at different points in scale. So, I remember when we first built CourseRank, with Benjamin and Henry and James at Stanford, like we had to figure out who was good at what, right? And initially we're all CS students. We all had like, pretty good grades. And so we're like, oh yeah, we all know everything, right? Like I would want to design the database and the architecture, and, Benjamin would be drawing UIs. And eventually we figured out that like, okay, Benjamin is better at the backend architecture and I'm better at the UI, and so on and so forth. So like that division of roles is really, really important to figure out in the early days. But then, at the same time, the way you will figure it out, I think, is through a lot of debate and conflict and arguing. And that's good. That's healthy in my mind, because that just leads to the best possible results, ultimately for your customers. So that's, those are some of the challenges. I think that changes a lot as the team grows. I strictly remember when Verkada was, I think, about 35, maybe 40 employees. This was like a year and a half into our, kind of company's life cycle. That's when I had this moment of like, crap, I have to do an all hands meeting. Not everybody knows everything anymore, right? Like when you're just 4 or 5 people, everybody knows everything. And so then around that size, we started, kind of formalizing communications. I remember around 200 employees, that was probably the point where, okay, now it's starting to be a little difficult for me to remember everyone's name. And maybe a new employee finds me intimidating. So I have to like really work on making sure that I'm approachable and that, that aspect is figured out. So those were some of the, growth challenges. If you zoom out, the hardest thing to scale up a business is always finding the smart, motivated people to work with you. And I actually think that that's one of the key advantages that probably every team, in this hackathon has, which is you're all surrounded by super smart people. And I think thinking back to my own days at Stanford, I really undervalued that, right? Like you can literally walk down the hall or go to any CS class and you can figure out who's smart and work with them. That's very special, right? And you should capitalize on that. And that can, kind of get your ideas going and get them off the ground. So that's one piece of my advice. The other thing that I will leave you with is build a lot of stuff and spend a lot of time building stuff. It will be very good regardless of the outcomes. In the best case scenario, or maybe in one scenario, you end up taking whatever you built and gets traction and it becomes a company, and that's an awesome outcome. But even if that doesn't happen, you just learn so much through building. Again, I remember applying for internships before CourseRank and after CourseRank. And, before CourseRank, I'm sending my resume and fighting really hard to apply for internships and, kind of caught in this race of like doing coding challenges or whatever they're asking me. After CourseRank or after whatever you build, you get to talk about what you build. And it turns out that not that many people in the world do that. And so then you immediately stand out to the employers and your opportunities open up. So yeah, build a lot of stuff, spend a lot of time building stuff. That's my my parting advice. And super excited to see yeah, what projects come out of the hackathon.
Amazing. That is truly inspiring and undoubtedly valuable to the students here, including me, as we move forward in our educational and professional lives. So thank you once again, Filip, for your time today. This was really such an honor.
Awesome. Thank you, Rhythm. And yeah, good luck everyone with the projects.
Awesome. Well, to all the participants listening in, stay tuned. We will be back in just a few minutes to continue the opening ceremony. Thank you.
Thank you.